Alright. Candy.
Huh?
I can interrupt y'all,
No, hold on for a second. Oh. I don't know. Put your big socks in your back, my hair, little back.
This is Daniel Gamble's speech for human communications. It's good to see everyone here this morning. Today we're going to be talking about interpersonal communication. More specifically, the difficulties which can arise when it goes sour. Now, we've all been in that situation where someone misinterprets, mishears, or misremembers what we've said. Now, sometimes these situations can be comedic. Sometimes they can be quite painful. I heard the story of a man the other day who was recounting one of his instances where he had been misunderstood and miscommunicated. And he and his friend went to Olive Garden. And they sat down at the table. The waitress took their drink orders, and she brought them the drinks, laid out the silverware, and she said, "Okay, sir, do you want the super salad?" And the man said, "That salad must be really great for them to call it a super salad." He said, "I wondered what in the world would be on this salad. It must have everything on it, that it would be so great." And he said, "Yes, ma'am, I'll take the super salad." And the waitress looked at him like he was the dumbest thing in the world and said, "No, sir. Do you want the super salad?" And he said, "Yes, ma'am, I want the super salad." So his dinner guest finally leaned over and said, "No, buddy, she's saying, do you want soup or salad?" Now, it ended up being a pretty embarrassing situation to that man, but other times it can be something that causes us significant trouble. So many disagreements between people boil down to simply miscommunications. And we all know that person, or maybe we are that person ourselves, that it doesn't matter what they say or how it's said, it's going to be misconstrued, misrepresented, often to make themselves the victim. Now, we're going to discuss what interpersonal communication is, ways that it can go wrong, and how to fix the problem so that we can communicate more effectively. Now, the first thing we need to do is to define what interpersonal communication is. The definition is interpersonal communication is communication in which the parties consider one another as unique individuals rather than as objects. Now, there's several things that we need to consider when talking and examining interpersonal communication. The first one is affinity. And affinity is the degree to which people like or appreciate one another. There's some people that you just like and appreciate. And there's other people that you just don't stand to be around. You don't have very much affinity. And then there's respect. The degree to which we hold each other in esteem. We seem to listen to people that we respect a lot more readily than those that we disrespect. Then there's the immediacy. And that's the degree of interest and attraction that we feel toward and communicate to others. This is usually non-verbally. I like to look at this from a love standpoint. If I'm really attracted to somebody, I'm going to hang on their every word. But if I'm not attracted to them, my body language is going to say, "I don't really care, I don't want you around me, I don't want you here." So it's the immediacy, the degree to which of interest and attraction that we feel. Now, the fourth is control. The social need that we all have to influence others. Every conversation that we enter into, every situation where we're communicating with someone, someone is going to try to assert dominance in that situation. Now, when communication goes right, it builds intimacy, it builds commonalities, it shares information, and what I really like, especially as a pastor, is it keeps the peace. Now, when it goes wrong, it destroys intimacy, it destroys commonalities, it passes erroneous information, and it creates war and strife. Now, let me give you an example of when communication went really wrong. In World War II, the Allies have just defeated Stalin and Hitler. And they send conditions for surrender, for a peaceful surrender, to the Prime Minister of Japan. Well, the Prime Minister of Japan, and I'm going to do my best to pronounce this word, responded very thoughtfully. He said, "Makuzatsu," one word. And then he walked away. Now, the choice of words is probably one of the most tragic decisions that he ever made in his role as Prime Minister. Because depending upon the context, that word has several meanings. Now, what the Prime Minister of Japan was actually saying was, "I have no comment to your question." But the way it was translated by the Allies and the news reporters was one of not worthy of comment, held in silent contempt. So when really the Prime Minister was saying, "I don't want to talk about it, no comment," the Allies took it as a complete rejection of their terms of surrender. So we know what happened later on. Because of that, the atomic bombs were dropped and hundreds of thousands of people were killed. Probably one of the most tragic examples of miscommunication. But there's several factors that can be involved when things go wrong. You know, there's the dialectical model. And the dialectical model says that we all have to deal with the issues and challenges of communication. It doesn't matter what role we're in, what position we're in, who we are, whether we're talking on a corporate level, in a church, or to our family. We all have to deal with those issues. Now, within that are dialectical tensions. And these are inherent conflicts when two incompatible forces exist in the same space. Because we're all different. And there's some people we can get along with, and there's some people that we can communicate with, and then there's just some people that always rub us the wrong way. And when you get two totally incompatible forces trying to occupy the same space, there's going to be a battle for dominance and control. Now, conflicts arise when we have different opinions, when we have different... Look at the example of communism versus socialism. They cannot agree. If you have a socialist and a conservative capitalist, they're not going to agree, and there's going to be a conflict there all the time. Now, there are ways that we can correct the problem. Just because we're bad communicators right now doesn't mean that we have to stay that way. Now, the first thing is we have to identify the problem. And what I would boil the problem down to always, at least in my opinion, is perception. Perception is the way someone interprets what you say. Now, it encompasses where they're coming from. It encompasses their background, their culture. It encompasses the reason why they think the way they do. You can say one thing in our culture, but it means a totally different in another. Let me give you an example, and I'm almost done. To give a thumbs up in America says, "Good job, you did, that's great," or "Okay." But if you go to the Middle East and you give somebody a thumbs up, it's like you're flipping them the bird. And we all know what that means. So they're offended. It's their perception that is different. So you have to understand someone's point of view and why they're perceiving things the way they're perceiving them. Because if I understand someone's perception and where they're coming from, I can shape and form what I say in a way that is going to be better received and better understood. Now, here's the key, I believe, to good communication and to perception. And it's listening. Listening and hearing are not the same thing. Hearing is a physical act. I hear with my ear. My eardrum beats, and it tells the tones to the ear, to the hairs in the canal of my ear, and my brain interprets those symbols. But I can hear something but not be listening. Listening is active. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone and you say something, but while they're talking, you're thinking of what you're going to say next? You may be hearing what they're saying, but you're not really listening. You ever had a conversation where somebody was doing that to you? And you can tell, you're not listening to me. You know, men get in trouble with their wives all the time. They'll be sitting there and the wife will be saying something, honey, that's good. And then she'll say something off kilter like, I ran over the dog today. Okay, honey, that's great. Well, they were hearing, but they weren't listening. If we listen and don't allow what people are saying to become background noise to us, but become our object of focus, it is then that we can understand where they're coming from. It's then that we can really understand what they're saying. We can understand what kind of methodology and language and body language we need to employ so they can better understand. Instead of just thinking what we should say next. As a pastor, we have to be all things to all people. We have to be chameleons. I am a very direct person. I like to just tell you how I feel, what I think, and move on. I like it when people are that way and they just tell me that. But as a pastor, you can't be that way to everybody. Because some people will get mad and leave your church if you just tell them flat out what you think. Amen? But other times we have to... one person told me one time that I'm very good at being shepherding. I'm good at couching things in language in ways that are softer for people, where it's getting the same point across, but it's getting the point across in a way that is more receptive to that individual. But you get that by listening to the Spirit, listening to that individual, learning them so that you know what they do. Now, in conclusion, it doesn't matter who you are, you have to communicate with everybody. If you are on an island by yourself, there was a movie several years ago called Castaway. He was the only person, Tom Hanks was the only person on that island. But guess what? He communicated with a volleyball. He found it is in humans to communicate. We can't get around it. So we can either choose to continue to be bad at communication, or we can choose to take a step back and say, what am I doing that's not working? And what are some changes that I can make to better communicate and form better interpersonal communications? Because we all have value. Every difference of opinion is not always a difference in principle. Sometimes it's just a difference of communication. Thank you for your time today, for being here, and I hope that this information was informative and entertaining and helpful to you.